This week I asked you to start out by watching a video on ancient Egyptian traditions about the soul, by watching a video about Plato and Aristotle, and by reading a short article about Trephination. The goal of these activities is to put Aristotle's views about the soul in context. Aristotle presented his views in his book De Anima, usually translated On the Soul. As described in the Crash Course video lesson, Aristotle held that there are three kinds of souls, or three aspects of the soul: vegetative, animal, and rational. Before we talk more about Aristotle's views, let's look at some historical context for him. You may have heard that the ancient Greeks generally, and the trio of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle specifically, are the originators of so-called Western philosophy, the kind of philosophy we're doing here that derives from a generally European intellectual tradition and is usually done in English these days. Sometimes, as in the Crash Course video, there's mention of Arab or Islamic philosophers, but otherwise it's a largely Eurocentric story and one that starts around 600 BCE with Thales, who's famous for thinking that everything's made of water. Socrates came later, living in the 400s BCE, and Aristotle lived in the 300s BCE. I asked you to take a look at the video on ancient Egyptian traditions about the afterlife in order to help us understand the Greeks. It's plain that Aristotle's idea that the heart is the locus of the mind is related to the Egyptian beliefs, as does his idea that there are multiple souls or aspects of the soul. Ancient Egyptians divided the soul or spirit into as many as 9 pieces or kinds, including the Khat or body, Ka, living soul, Ren, the true self, and Ba, personality. The Egyptian tradition far predates the Greeks, going back at least as far as the Egyptian Old Kingdom, which flourished from around 2600 to 2100 BCE. Keep in mind that the historical period in Egypt began at least 500 years earlier than that, around 3100 BCE. Think about it. Roughly the same amount of time has passed between the origin of the Old Kingdom in Egypt and Socrates' life in ancient Greece as has passed since Socrates and us now. So Socrates is only half as old as the first pharaohs to us. I also asked you to read a short article about trephination, or drilling holes in the skull. There are 3 reasons I wanted to expose you to that history. First, although the Egyptians and Aristotle believed that the heart was the seat of the mind, I didn't want you to think that they were entirely ignorant about brains. As long as there have been head injuries, it's been obvious that the brain is somehow important for thought and for life. The earliest evidence of trephination goes back to about 6500 BCE, so well before even the Egyptian dynastic burial practices that we were just discussing. Trephination is sometimes said to be the oldest form of surgery, and it's thought to have been used to treat a variety of physical injuries, as well as what we would today call mental health problems. So evidence of trephination is probably evidence of people thinking hard about the relationships between minds and bodies, and especially brains, of course. And this is my second point. Thinking about minds and bodies far predates the Greeks or even the Egyptian pharaohs. Finally, third, evidence of trephination can be found in different time periods all over the world. It's found in ancient Greece and Egypt, prehistoric Europe, and also in sub-Saharan Africa, China, and South America. The take-home message is that thinking about minds and bodies is also ancient and global. So, although we're going to read from Aristotle and then from people who are influenced by the Greek philosophical tradition, we shouldn't imagine that they invented these ideas all on their own. It's safe to say that the ideas we're discussing with respect to Aristotle were not something he invented from whole cloth, as they say, but were derived from and influenced by the Egyptian tradition. And the Egyptian tradition also influenced other African philosophies of mind, which we'll touch upon in a few weeks. Of course, we don't have receipts to show that Aristotle checked the Book of the Dead out of the Library of Alexandria in 350 BCE, so it's often hard to pinpoint exactly how various thinkers influenced one another. But these cultures interacted in trade around the Mediterranean Sea, and so we have good reason to think that they were exchanging ideas as well as wine and cloth. Okay. Now we're ready to talk about Aristotle's views of the soul.